Hello, and welcome to the second special edition of BSG webinars, everyone. It's Humulus U. My name is Dan Carney, Graphic Design Manager at BSG, coming to you from my home office in Eden Prairie. Thanks for joining us. This is our 16th episode and our second Humulus U episode. Normally, we hold a one-day hop symposium in Yakima, Washington, but as everyone knows, we have to take a break from getting together, so we decided we wanted to bring Humulus U to you. So thanks for joining us. Before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to remind everyone that Tuesday's webinar, the U.S. Hop Crop Report by Jessica Reel of Double R Hop Ranches, is available on our YouTube channel. Just search BSG Craft in YouTube and subscribe to see all of our videos that we have. Also, if you haven't done so yet, please register for upcoming Humulus U webinars. You can register for them and any other upcoming webinars at bsgcraft.com/webinars or by going to bsgcraftbrewing.com and clicking on the webinars tile. Next Tuesday, we'll have an in-depth session on hop sensory with Emily Dobell, and she is our sensory scientist and raw materials specialist at the RAR Technical Center. She'll be joined by Wayne Scheck, the Director of Strategic Marketing here at BSG. Then on the following Friday, we'll be talking about biotransformation and hop flavor with Patty Aaron. She's our Manager of Research and Innovation at the RAR Technical Center. So please be sure to register and check those two out. So now on to today's presentation. We ask that throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, do it through the Q&A function, which is usually at the center of the toolbar below. After the discussion, we will be opening up for a few questions. So with that, I would like to welcome our guests, Peter of Urban Roots, Vinnie of Russian River, Evan of Green Cheek, and Tim of Cellarmaker. Unfortunately, Henry had another obligation today, so he won't be able to join us. So Peter, Vinnie, Evan, Tim, how are you guys?
Hey, Dan.
Doing well.
Doing great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. So everyone's doing well, staying clear of smoke and things like that. Sounds like it's getting a little bit better for you guys, so yeah, it's good to hear.
Yep.
I guess we could just jump right into this. Let's talk about hops. So I have a couple questions. I'll kind of go in a round table and sort of start with one of you and then sort of move on to the next. And so we'll kind of go, pretty loose and casual. So first, Peter, I know you do, but do you remember your first trip to a hop growing region? And then how have your visits changed your operations, and your approach to a brewery? Because I know in your past, you used to go to Yakima for a brewery. Then you worked with us at BSG. So you're in Yakima for a completely different reason. But now you're back to a brewery. And so, that transition has to have changed.
Yeah. So really for me, I'd been brewing professionally for 12 or 13 years before I joined BSG as the technical sales director for the West Coast. And my first trip to Yakima was with BSG to visit growers and do hop selection with our customers. And I remember having this epiphany, like, how could I have been making beer for 12 years or 13 years or whatever it was and never been here before? Like, it was just light bulb after light bulb after light bulb going off, just seeing the process, meeting the growers, walking through hop fields, just smelling the town during harvest with just the whole region smelled like hops. And I've always been intrigued more by Belgian and German beer styles. And it just gave me full headlong dive back into being inspired to come and brew, new, interesting, different IPAs, whether it's taking an established hop variety and finding a new application for it, or seeing all the experimental varieties that are kind of in various degrees of production and propagation.
Excellent. Vinnie, you've been in the business a long time. How about you?
Yeah, before I answer that, thanks for promoting Planning for President, Evan.
Oh, nice.
Anyways, back to the regularly scheduled program. So
I know how I'm voting this year is all I'm saying. I know how I'm voting.
I did not plan that, I promise. So Yeah, you know what? I think what was your question, Dan?
It's kind of, how has, since your first time going to Yakima or any hop harvest region, changed over the years? What's it like
Yeah,
now versus any of that first time you were there?
I think the one area that when I think back to those, like for me, it was the early 2000s, was that how few brewers were in the Northwest, either Oregon, Idaho, or Washington, and also even those that were, how few were connected with the farm, whether it was through a direct or through their broker, and that's really changed, and even fast forward to 2010, which was my first trip to Yakima with the Hop Quality Group. I'd been, plenty of times on my own, but even then with the Hop Quality Group, there was very little interaction between grower and brewer. And I just think that that's a huge change in how, the industry works together. And it's so important to have that communication, just for new hop varieties, for bettering the quality of the hops, whether it's directly with the grower, whether it's through a broker, and that just only makes for better hops all the way around, to have that positive communication that hopefully makes everyone make better beer. A high tide floats all boats, and the craft beer industry has always worked that way, and I think there's that synergy between hops and craft for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned just, working with growers directly. Last week when we talked to Jessica at Double R, she emphasized how important brewer feedback is for the growers. And with people not being in Yakima, that being kind of a, situation where they're not going to get as much feedback without that grower being right there in their facility, or even say like BSG's selection facility. So, how that synergy actually happens is it's a great point to bring up, and that's important for that region and the product itself, so that we keep evolving to have better beers. But I digress. Tim, how about you? What's been some of your experiences through, travel?
Well, I mean, not long ago did we do our first trip to Yakima, so I remember it well. And it's kind of funny to hear Vinnie talk about how only 10 years ago things were so different, because when we went, everyone was just so interested and on the same page with like wanting to interact with brewers, and we met so many different people, and everyone is just like wanted to talk to us and so excited. And yeah, I can't imagine not going to Yakima now. This year we're not going because of all the fires, but like it is like the most important trip for us as a small brewery to go up there and talk to the representatives, talk to the brokers, the growers, to find the hops, to smell the hops, and just continue to be committed to that high quality.
Sure.
Dan, can I add one more thing on this topic too? I remember being at Hop Union's first beer school. It was 2004, I think. And I remember Ralph getting up and speaking about how the industry was shrinking, and of the farms, you didn't have the kids coming back. Jessica Reel wasn't back yet.
Sure.
Aaron Gamache hadn't come back yet. Pat Smith was at school. I could go on and on and on. Jason Peralt was probably the only one that was, and not the only, but there are others, but you had so many farms that didn't know what was going to happen. And I think, no matter who you buy your hops from, whether it's BSG or any of the other brokers, that shouldn't be lost on the brewers, that this industry could have easily gone the other direction. And thankfully it didn't. The next generation came back, and they're keeping it, that generational agricultural business moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. There was, a lot of families that did have sort of that lull of a generation that was normally to take over and didn't. So Good point. Evan, let's get to you. How have your journeys through hop selection been?
Good. Yeah, I think my first trip was like 2014 to Yakima, and I think it really opened up my eyes to how disconnected I had been before, to all the ingredients that we're using in our beers. And it's just funny, like, you know, in general, breweries were this factory of sorts that is just, working around the clock year round. And we couldn't be more different than, a winery that is watching these grapes grow and being extremely connected to this agricultural product, and, picking at the perfect time and all of these aspects. And so that first trip to Yakima for me was absolutely that, of getting a better understanding that this is an agricultural product that I need to be more connected to. And so walking those fields and seeing the different quality in different lots of hops was quite possibly the most eye-opening experience for me personally, because I would blame a certain hop variety instead of a lot earlier on in my career. I would say, oh, you know what? I don't like Columbus, or I don't like Citra, or I don't like whatever the hop was, instead of searching for a certain farm, searching for a certain lot that more hit the flavor profile that I personally wanted in my beer. And so I think that was quite possibly the most exciting experience, as well as talking to hop farmers and understanding that connection with the hop farmer needs to be there, so that one, you can give them feedback, and then also so that they could taste their hops in your beer. And so I think all of what that experience was just so insanely eye-opening that it's something that has just become such a huge part of the culture of our brewery since.
Yeah, that's
Evan,
great. I kind of actually is a perfect segue into the next point I want to talk about.
That's right. I did that. Yeah.
I know. It's like you knew. So, Vinnie, I kind of want to point this one towards you because it reminds me of a couple of years ago. We had a keg of Pliny the Younger show up at the RAR Stubby in Shakopee. That's in Minnesota for any of you who don't know. But you had written on the keg collar that it takes great malt to make a great beer. And, it was for all the employees. And trust me, everyone enjoyed that very much. So anytime you want to send us kegs of Pliny the Younger, we're more than happy to receive them.
Noted.
No, not doing that. But why do you think hops get such a spotlight in brewing? Because, oftentimes beers will be named after hops. They'll list the hops on the label. Otherwise, you'll just get, crystal malt, two-row malt.
Yep.
It's never like the brand of actual malt. So, if you attend like a malt selection, there's no such thing as that, right? I mean, you just test out malts and do what you need. But hop selection kind of is a lot more refined, and but both those things contribute to flavors. So why do you think hops get such a spotlight on brewing?
I personally think that a part of it is that malt is more of barley is a commodity product. Let's just call a spade. And short of a micro maltster, which there are a lot of, cool little small, maltsters, popping up around the country. It's tough to really take a lot of barley and keep it separate on the scale that, say, RAR, is, gets you with the way that you malt your barley. And so I think that's a part of it right there. I mean, a perfect example, there's this movie called King Corn, and these guys try to follow. They grow like an acre of corn or something. They try to follow it, and they get to a certain point, and then they can't follow it anymore because it's going to get blended into this massive silo, you know, at the agricultural facility. So I think to a degree that maybe has a part, that's maybe a part of it. But you know, beyond that though, malt is like super critical. Like I always talk about with our hoppy beers that, you know, malt is just as important because it's the foundation in which your hops can sit on. And you know, I love to use Best Pale malt from Simpson as this kind of add-on malt in with our 2-row. For instance, like our Blind Pig IPA, it's 6.25% alcohol. It's not a big beer, it's not a small beer, but add, you know, 20% Best Pale. Maybe on a lower alcohol hoppy beer, I'll add a little bit more just to add more body and mouthfeel. So we do talk about, in that case, we will talk about Best Pale, but yeah, we don't go back to the specific variety that, you know, Simpson uses for that. But I do think what I said before is probably one of the reasons why that is the case.
Evan, what do you think of that? You know, like how does malt play a part with your hops and
Yeah, and then I think also just why hops get showcased as well. But yeah, I mean we end up I think taking what Vinnie had started years ago as this light colored IPA and kind of continued it further to where you know, we're looking for a very blank canvas a lot of times in our hoppy beers, depending on ABV. I mean, you know, if we're making a low ABV beer, I mean, Simpson's malt all the way, I think is going to is going to help create a little bit more of a fuller body experience and some weight to the beer that is definitely needed. But for us, we end up using a lot of raw Pilsner malt for our IPAs, and we'll just use 100% raw Pilsner malt for an IPA, or if we're really going for that light color, we'll go for 100% Gambrinus Pils. And I really like the Gambrinus Pils malt a lot in our IPAs, where it just ends up being the blankest of canvases, and you can taste the hops even more, which is like, I don't know, the funniest sort of thing. I like, you keep moving in this direction, you know, where, you know, you have the IPA of 10 years ago or 15, 20 years ago, and you continue to see this just evolution of color and from, you know, how much caramel malt are you using? I know for me, 14 years ago, the first IPAs I was making were Maris Otter and Crystal C60. You got to have that malt backbone, you know, help support. You got to support the hops, you know, is what the rule of, you know, was always just supporting the hops with all that malt. And I couldn't disagree more now, where you know, I think it's a lack of understanding water chemistry that ends up being the biggest play in that philosophy, you know, because you need that sweetness and you need that body to kind of overtake the, you know, either the minerality in your water or the harshness that you're getting from your bittering additions and everything. And so anyway, I think that hops continue to play such a huge role in brewing, though, because that first taste of fresh hoppy beer is so insanely mind-blowing that it's, at least for me, like that's the, you know, the constant search for the best wave, you know, of just how do I get that fresh hoppy beer.
Yeah. Well, it's a constant moving target, right? You're always looking for the next thing, and that's great. It initiates change and innovation and things like that. So, Tim, I'm going to move on to you.
I mean, the focus on hops, I mean, malt to me is kind of like the meat and potatoes of your dish or your stew or whatever. You know, it's what's going to fill you up and give you that base. But the hops are the spice. It's what makes it interesting. And like, you know, the more you brew through different styles and not just IPA, like any beer style, you realize the importance of the hops in those styles. And you might not taste it at first, or you might not even realize it's the hops speaking, but like, you know, you go down the line and, you know, even a Belgian triple is like, there's a hop character there that keeps it interesting and it keeps it from going like overly sweet. And that's extremely important to developing a well-balanced beer. You know, as I try to brew other styles than IPA, because we brew a lot of IPA here, I always, the first thing I look at is like, well, how do the hops play into this style and how do they balance off the malt? You know, I think that's why Pilsner is having such a big comeback, because the spiciness from the hops that is kind of different than the American citrus tropical fruit quality is extremely interesting to our brewers' palates. And yeah, I mean, malt is obviously, you know, it is extremely important, but hops just bring a quality to the table that is unlike any other ingredient. It could be, you know, you can represent those qualities with the actual fruit or spice or whatever, but hops have it all right there. And it's kind of like this constant conquest to find those.
Right. Well, Peter, I'll let you talk on that, Mark, too.
I always like to use a band analogy. Like the hops are definitely the lead singer. And so everybody, like, you know, name bands throughout history, and especially if you're only casually interested in the band, you know, a casual music fan can probably name the lead singer of whatever band you're talking about. And then you start getting to the guitar player, maybe they know them. Malt is like the rhythm section for the band. Like, how many famous bass players and drummers are there, right? Like, they might be in the famous band, but not many people can name them because they're so focused on like the front man. And the hops are definitely the front man, especially in American style IPAs. So, you know, you need that good rhythm section to hold it down, and then let the front man or front woman go for it, you know? So I always think about, like, we do a lot of musically inspired beers here, so it's just natural for us to think about it in terms of music. So
That's a great analogy. That especially works with a lot of, you know, brewers, and especially me, because, you know, everyone knows who Keith Moon is, and the Who had such a great ensemble, but, you know, he's still overlooked. So all of you spent time in Yakima, and some of you have gone to Germany. What do you enjoy most about these visits? And I know, like, Vinnie, you were talking about sort of the connection with the farmers and the process and ingredients and stuff like that. But just the relationships built during these times. You know, I always see, anytime I've been out to Yakima or CBC and stuff like that, I always hear brewers talking about, hey, we should get together and collaborate. You know, like, a lot of these things happen on those trips as well. So maybe, you know, Evan, how about you talk about sort of experiences like that, and then we'll kind of end with Vinnie, because I know, like, Vinnie and Peter, you've gone to Germany. I'm not sure about you, Evan, or Tim. So
I've only been to Germany to drink liters of beer instead of smelling hops. I haven't been lucky enough for that trip yet, but it's definitely one that I want to get to, because Pilsner continues to become more and more of a focus of our brewery, and getting selected German hops and seeing the process and understanding those farms a little bit better would be absolutely killer. Seeing here in Yakima that experience, and how it then can like translate into the beer, I think has been instrumental for our brewery for sure. But I think, you know, visiting Yakima is kind of like, you know, echoing the same thing I sort of said earlier, just about that connection and that learning experience of continuing to be that much closer to the ingredients that you're using in your beer, but talking to the farmer and learning further about picking dates and how that changes things, and then just having those conversations about what are we looking for in the beer. Are we looking for just high alpha, or are we focused more on the aroma and the flavor of the hop? And so I think that those a lot of those conversations have said continue to happen throughout those trips, and then just, man, the excitement of being in Yakima though, like during harvest, is just it puts a smile on every brewer's face. There's absolutely nothing like it. Getting there, the smell and the look, and it's like, I don't know, it's like Christmas or something. I don't really know how to describe it, but like the first time you go, it's just kind of this understanding that this is the thing that I'm doing every year, no matter what. Like there's not a question about it. Did I answer your question? I sort of rambled there.
No, you're talking about the experience. I agree. Like there's something about walking outside and it smells like somebody just opened up like a fresh bag of hops, but it's like constant. It's always there in the air, and you're just like, yeah. It's definitely got its own vibe feeling. So
there should be a sleep study done, like between harvest and non-harvest in Yakima, and see if those that live in Yakima sleep better during harvest, because the hops are just in the air, especially when you're in Yakima proper, where there are several processing plants.
What's funny is we used to have Humulus U over at CLS, and we would set up the class inside the where the cooling floors are. And so you'd have just piles of hops sitting right next to everyone the entire day. And by about 2:00, you could just see people kind of like nodding off, and it was just like everyone. I mean, there wasn't anybody who had more energy at the end of the day. So that's one of the reasons we decided to move it back to our hop facility, because we weren't processing yet. It was just bales coming in. So, everyone wasn't exactly falling asleep during the middle of, Humulus U. So not something you want when you're putting on a class, I guess. But how about you, Vinny? Like tell us a little bit about like the Germany side.
I've never done selection there, but I've been to the Hallertau. I think one area that is often overlooked, and quite honestly, I didn't know about until I learned it from Val Peacock, and then subsequently had been to Germany, but again, never been there for selection, so I can't speak to that. But they have a totally different kilning system than we see here. The classic, kilns that you see that are typically connected, you have the typical down hour picker at most farms still, and then there's a few new iterations of pickers, and then you go into the typical drying facility, and they have the huge beds, and the depth is usually 30 inches or so. And in Germany, they're smaller, and they're only like 14 inches deep. And so it really changes the way that kilning happens. And one of the problems with the way that we kiln hops in America is that bed depth is pretty deep, and so it's uneven between the low, the middle, and the upper portion. And I know the Hop Quality Group did a study back, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago on that, and definitely found that the stuff at the bottom of the kiln was much drier than the stuff at the top. And then what we're buying is a blend of all that. But there's definitely something to be learned from the Germans and the Wolf dryers that they use that have probably is a better way to dry hops.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Like that was my biggest takeaway from visiting Germany, was instead of like a small farm in Yakima would be, 500,000 acres, you have, or not half, you'd have 500 acres would be a small farm. And in Germany, it's these groups of like really small family-owned farms that are all kind of contributing to a collective or a cooperative. And I don't know if it's better or worse. I mean, Vinnie's got a great point with how they're kilned is one big difference in processing, but that was the biggest takeaway for me. Like, you drive down the highway and you'll pass, 30 family farms, and you could drive down the highway through Yakima and it's all one farm for a good long time.
Tim, how about you? Experiences in Yakima?
I mean, I echo all of these guys. Like, going to hop country is magical. Every moment of it, when you're not even like talking about it, you're smelling it or you're drinking it. But I think it's really important to get up there to see the process of the farming, of the picking, the kilning, the cleaning of the hops, to smell hop samples right out of a bale, smell those, see what they smell like. They smell different than the hops that you select on the table. They smell different than the pellets you get. And that's important because, what we're starting to see and realize and learn is, when you crack open a fresh bag of hops that you just got from Yakima, that crop year, they're going to smell different than they smell 6 months down the line. And it's truly important to becoming a good hoppy beer brewer to understand that development. So I think it's cool because, at first I think I would have got really upset. Or I did get upset a lot of times when I'm cracking open bags of hops, but now I've become more patient with them. And I know not to flip out right away when I smell something that I don't fully agree with, or something that I like a lot that I thought smelled different on the table than it does in the bag. I'm like, oh, this isn't the same hop. They're lying to us. It's a big conspiracy. But it's not. Those hops a lot of times do kind of turn around and come back to what you remember. So that's been really an awesome experience.
What's always,
Yeah,
and I didn't realize this even when I was working for BSG and selling hops to breweries. But like, if you really think about it conceptually, when you're doing hop selection, you're looking at a lot that's 100 bales, 200 bales from a big farm, and you're getting a little brick from one of the bales that's supposed to represent all of that, right? So it's something like you're saying, like, I've learned patience in my new brewery now. We're on our second harvest year with this brewery, knowing, because we had the same thing happen to us. I was like, dude, I don't remember this character in our mosaic, or I don't remember this character in our centennial. To have that patience and just the realization that, selection is important. It's intensely important to our brewery to make sure we're getting the flavors that we want out of each variety. But it's also having the patience is the best word, maybe maturity or understanding is another word for it, to know that like the lot that you're getting, like, no, there's no like you're saying, there's no conspiracy, but it's like just changing. Pelletizing changes a hop, and storage changes a hop. So being able to kind of, I talked to my team, like, so we just did selection a couple days ago from one of our brokers, and we talked to them about, like, being able to taste through or smell through the samples that you're tasting, and kind of like envision where that's going to go after pelletizing and after it's in a beer. And that just all comes with experience. And the downside of that experience is you get one shot at that every year. So it takes like many years of doing it to try and guide your program to that point.
I think that's one of the most difficult aspects of, sorry.
No, you go ahead first.
Yep, go ahead.
I think that's one of the most difficult aspects as a brewer, is continuing to try to figure out the connection between what the hops smell like in your hands, in the bag, versus what it actually does in the beer. And so once you get to, I don't know, that understanding of how that translates, I'm still trying to figure it out. I think just like what, Tim was talking about, we've shared some different lots of hops throughout the these last harvests, and it's just so funny. You get a brand new lot of whatever hop variety it is, and it doesn't hit the way that you want it to, and you actually then put it in the beer, and it's the translation just isn't quite there. Like I would love to be able to do, I don't know, selection and dry hop something and then see what those results are, but that's obviously impractical. But I think to then touch on what Peter said, that representative sample is also the difficult aspect of it too, because whenever you're getting this one little brewer's cut or sample from this bale, and that's supposed to be representative of everything else, I think that becomes difficult too, because that's where I'm becoming more and more curious about just doing pellet selection so that we can get what I feel like is a better representation of the entire lot.
And I was just going to add that, I'd look at selection, and maybe this is a takeaway for some of the participants that are watching, is not as yes, of course, I'm looking for a specific thing that I like in hops, but I look at it more like what I don't want. Okay, I don't want any onion garlic. So I don't want diesel. I don't want a too green of a hop that's maybe a little early, picked too early, but of course I don't want to pick too late because we'd end up with onion garlic. So really, it's looking for things that I don't want, because like Peter said, that, brewer cuts are getting smaller and smaller. Most of the brewers today don't even remember the old brewers cuts that were big. And we still get a couple of those from our direct contracts, but not many. And I miss those, because I think they're a better way to look at hops. They show dryness, an over drying hop that the little plugs don't show as much now. And I miss those, but just looking at hops, what you don't want, that's where selection is for me. But also, I think it ties back to what we've all echoed, that relationship with the grower. You start learning what farms grow the hops that work for you, and most hops are pretty great coming out of the Northwest. So it really becomes personal preference, but that connection to the grower can be directly correlated to the quality that you see. And we find ourselves selecting the same farms year after year after year, even blind.
That's awesome. I think like one of the things that I totally agree with is this idea of finding what you personally like, what works for your brewery out of these different flavor profiles and aroma profiles from these hops, because it isn't just I have to get, Citra from this one farm because that's what Tim likes or that's what Vinnie likes. And, instead, that sensory experience of smelling through these different lots, and totally agree. Finding the things, sorting out the things that you don't like first, and then those, picking out the lots then from there that quite possibly are going to hit the way that you want your beer to shine.
That actually, Evan, you're on track. This goes right into my next one, because a lot of with dry hopping and like typical dry hopping methods, what do you guys do at your breweries, and does it change from beer to beer? Because some brewers like to do quick bursts of 2 to 3 days, and others will do 7 days or more. And while you dry hop during fermentation is still active, or are you waiting until full attenuation, sort of? Evan, I'll let you go since you just segued right in beautifully.
Oh man, to be the first to talk about this, I mean, I think, we're probably going to all maybe echo similar things on what this is. For dry hopping, we are so, I don't know, we take a simple approach. And we just put the hops in through the top of the tank. We just put positive pressure on the tank. We open up bags and we pour in. It, of course, gets more complicated from there on timing and depending on the beer and contact time, like what you're talking about. We, for the last few years have continued to be in this spot that was difficult to navigate as we were trying to understand hop creep better and better and better. And so we were on this really long contact time for a while that drove me crazy. You know, we were seeing around 14 days, sometimes 15 days before we would finally get a passed forced diacetyl test in these beer samples from dry hopping. And we just kind of, we embraced it there for a bit, you know, because I'm really not in any hurry to try to just pump it out. And so, but it was actually continuing to taste Tim's beers. Tim and I share beers often and send each other beers. And he well, I don't want to jump the gun here, but he does more of a quick contact time on his with his hops. And I continue to be so much more inspired by this fresh smelling hop profile in his beers that I couldn't pass up trying to replicate the greatness that Cellarmaker gets in their hoppy beers. And so we continue to work in this direction of less and less contact time. So now we're down to a spot of about 4 days of dry hop time, and could not love the hop character more. For us, we dry hop right at the end of, well, I guess for most beers. So for American IPA, we are dry hopping the beer right after harvest. And so we'll harvest yeast out, we'll get the rest of the yeast out of the tank, and then dry hop. And we don't rouse it. We don't do anything other than just putting it in the top of the tank and then allowing, you know, this secondary fermentation to take place. And so that's how we do it for American IPA. For hazy IPA, we, depending on the beer, we will do some biotransformation and say add on day 2. It all depends on just whether or not we need the yeast or not. And so, but I do find that the biotransformation aspect is really neat, and I like what it is, but I kind of like fresh hop character more. And so that not dry hopping during fermentation is something that I prefer personally, so that I can just get a bright, fresh hop character.
Well, Tim, I'll let you talk next, since Evan made you blush there.
Since I told everybody what you're doing.
I'll take the advertisement. Yeah, you know, it's funny that Evan, you know, mentions my technique, and I think all 4 of us here probably have talked to each other about what we do, and it's not that far off from each other. I don't think there's any secrets or mysteries that really help your beer pop more, but personally, I can only really speak to that. Evan's right. We do a really short contact time. We break up all of our dry hops, unless they're small, into multiple day dry hops. So we'll do like basically a 16-hour, 24-hour break between each dry hop, just to like help saturation. They go in the top of the tank. We do rouse right after we add them. Try to, again, kind of break up the boat that might form at the top of the beer. And yeah, like basically before we even add that second dry hop 16 hours later, we're actually pulling out whatever's fallen to the bottom of the cone immediately. We don't rouse that back up. My opinion, those hops are pretty much spent, and rousing's not going to really do much to it anyway. So get those out, add in your next hop load, rouse, wait 24 hours, and pull those out. And that's typically, like an IPA would be a 2-part dry hop, and just keep hop pulling and letting the creep happen, and hopefully it doesn't happen too much, and then crash when it's ready. And it's really that simple. But one thing I think is really important is, you know, I'm not dry hopping tanks anymore. I've got my team who does that for me. But I am still like very much invested in smelling the hops often. So, and you catch things, you know, like we recently had a lot of Centennial where I just happened to smell the bag, and it was very different than everything else. It was maybe over-kilned, but it was definitely oxidized. And now it's like the rule here is every bag of Centennial you open, you have to smell. Really, you should be smelling everything. And I spot check constantly and often just to catch things like that. And with that Centennial, it turned out like the broker admitted that some of the bags have been compromised, and they thought everything was fine. It looks fine, but it turns out, I forget exactly if there was O2 pickup through the bag or they got more O2 into the bags and then nitrogen flush as well. But man, it's just so important. It doesn't matter when or how you add your hops, like they just got to smell good, you know?
Yeah, it's one of the negatives that the hop industry has gone to a soft pack, with the bag instead of the hard pack where they vacuum sealed it. Because in the old days, you'd cut the bag open and you would hear and it would, let the air in. But now it's, soft pack, and I like the soft pack better. But when you're getting your hops shipped to you as a small brewer, via UPS or FedEx, that's definitely one of the downsides, as, opposed to getting your hops, hopefully, you're buying from BSG, they're coming maybe with some malt. If it's not coming that way, maybe you can order it by the pallet if possible. I know that's not possible for the majority of the small brewers, but it is definitely one reason to grow a little bit, to be able to get some of your hops shipped to you on a pallet. I'll also add what Tim said about, spot checking a bag. I recently put an herb grinder at both our breweries on the hop table, and am encouraging our brewing team to grind hops, smell them, and give your team the tools to grind the pellets and smell them. And just a quick check, like Tim was saying, does that smell like Centennial? What a great learning opportunity for your brewing team, and for that matter, your front of the house team as well, when the world gets back to normal.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We have the same rule where every bag gets smelled before it gets added to the tank, and I think that we've avoided some pretty big mistakes by going that route.
Well, that's all good. So Peter, I'm going to kind of move towards you. Do you have like a different dry hop approach for hazy versus or hazy versus clear IPAs? How does that kind of differ?
No, we keep it. It's pretty much the same. There's only a couple of beers that we dry hop during fermentation, and or specifically towards the tail end of fermentation. And the main reason is I need the yeast out of there, and I don't want to repitch dry hop to yeast. It's very rare because we often have. What are we up to now? We only have 10 fermenters, and we often have 3 different strains of yeast. So I don't have a lot of flexibility for sources of yeast. So it's only a couple of beers where we're like, all right, I know I'm not getting yeast out of that tank again, that we do it. But yeah, typically like Evan was saying, we wait for attenuation, we harvest yeast. Once the yeast is out of there, we dry hop. We're like 3-4 days contact time before we drop the hops out the bottom. We do rouse on day 3 with CO2, just to kind of, I don't know. We've noticed just through our just sensory that we feel like we get a little more consistent hop aroma if we rouse versus when we don't. And I don't know if it's really a resuspension of oils that might be collecting towards the cone or what, but we will bubble some CO2 through there for 15-20 minutes the day before we drop the hops out. Most of our beers, there's a couple of big double IPAs that we'll do that twice. We'll give it like 3-4 days, bubble, drop them, and then go back in again before chilling the tank. Yeah, and then hazy's pretty much the same. It's usually just more, like it's a higher quantity of dry hop.
Yeah.
But our bigger on the inside double IPA, that one we actually do rely on a little bit of biotransformation. We hit it with Columbus hops with like 1 day left in fermentation. And what's really cool is that specific hop, which can lean really heavy towards dank diesel, garlic, onion. If you're getting it in there early on, you get these wonderful like tropical fruit flavors. So it's one of the few beers that we do that little trick with. But again, I'm not counting on getting yeast out of that tank again once I do that. But yeah, we're definitely in the short burst school. If it needs more, do it again. So.
Well, excellent. Say, I want to not cut you guys off there, but we have some questions that have come in, and I want to save some time for some of the questions that our viewers have asked. One of them is pretty good. It's not every brewer can go or get to Yakima or qualify for selection. For those of us who cannot, how do you guys recommend we go about blending the hop lots and varieties we are able to get and get the flavor and aroma combinations as well?
I'd say that what we all talked about, having a grinder at your hop table at the brewery so you can smell them. You can do your own selection. If it smells like onion garlic, call your supplier and tell them that and ask for a different lot. I'd also say that you can do just like some lab benchtop trials, even if you don't have a lab. Just pull a pre-dry hopped IPA from a tank and just do like some 1 liter, single hop dry hops and, let it sit, maybe swirl it by hand, give it a smell, and you can kind of come up with your own little hop selection and work out what the blend may be for a specific beer.
I think that just because you can't do selection doesn't always mean you can't get assigned to a lot through your grower or broker. So if you come across something that you really like, that's the moment to call them up and say, hey, I really love this lot number. Is there enough available to, put me on that if you've got contracts? If not, in the past, Cellarmaker has literally coughed up, $5,000, $10,000 to buy as much of that lot as we could. And it's a big hit, but I think that's a big part of, our early success was getting those hops when we could.
Yeah, we've absolutely done that where we've been brewing a collab at another brewery, and I'm like, ooh, I really like this one. I really like this lot, whether they select it or not, whether they just got it on spot or what have you. And I've called that broker literally from their brewery and been like, hey, can you either assign my contract to this lot number, or can you ship me, 2 boxes or 4 boxes or whatever we need of that hop? So that'll save you some money from buying like 1 box of every lot for the variety that's available, which if you're a small brewery, that might be a year's supply, right? So, bumping into your friends, networking, talking with people who you trust and respect, like, hey, I only need, 4 boxes of Cascade a year. Like, what lot number are you on this year? What are you digging? Where are you getting it from? And most people are pretty forthcoming with that information. Like, we're all buying from the same pool of ingredients. So it's not super like, I don't know. My experience is people are not super defensive of that information.
Yeah, I agree with you guys as well, and I'll echo the same thing, but you don't have to go to Yakima to do full selection. It's an amazing experience, and I think, everyone should do it. But if you don't have the time or the resources, the easiest way is, and it's easier now more than ever. It was a lot more difficult to ask years ago, but now asking, hey, can you send me 3 different lots of this specific hop variety? And, that you're going to be purchasing each one of these boxes, whether you like them or not. You can at least continue to try to figure out, and it's a slow game, but like you can continue to figure out what what lots you end up liking in your beer or just from the rub. And that's where I think you can end up winning once you find a lot you like, which sometimes they're out of, but at least, it's the journey. I think it's the journey that ends up quite possibly being the best part of it.
No, that's, you brought up, it being easier to select. And one of the questions that we have is, how has hop selection via mail been different than on-site selection? Any tips for brewers who are going to be selecting hops from the brewery instead of a space designated for hop selection? And then, have you guys experienced any advantages or disadvantages of not being, at selection?
I think the main thing is just to be ready when the samples arrive and get your selections back to your broker the same day. And a lot of brokers are putting a timeline on it. adhere to those timelines and understand how much work this is for all the brokers and how much money it's costing them in FedEx and UPS to overnight samples to all of us. We should all be grateful for everyone in the hop industry for supporting all the brewers, large and small, this way.
Oh, thank you. That's actually a very nice sentiment, because they have been working very hard out there in Moxie. So do you believe that lower kilning temperatures have contributed to the dry hop creep phenomenon that many of us have been experiencing? Also, what are your thoughts on hop creep, the spike in VDK that accompanies it, and how are you managing it?
I think Vinnie probably answers this one the best. I'm not jumping in.
I've been doing so much work on hop creep. I didn't want to steal the floor again, but
the other three of us are just waiting for you to talk about it.
yeah. I think kiln temperature is one part of hop creep. We used to not have hop creep to this extent. Yes, I know that you can look back into the late 1800s and that hop creep existed in England, and it was referenced, and they called it the freshening power of hops. But let's face it, it hasn't become really bad until the last 5, 6, 8 years. So what's happened? Well, kiln temperatures have gone down, so that is going to be a part of it. We've done a lot of trials here at Russian River where we have a lot of our hops, or a portion of them, kilned back at 145 Fahrenheit. I'm doing that again this year. I'll be able to run full experiments with Pliny the Elder with every dry hop, and we have some portion of those of all the dry hops in Pliny kilned at a higher temperature. So we've already proven that we can shave a couple days off hop creep with a slightly higher kiln temp. Tom Shellhammer's published some papers out of OSU saying that it's the low kiln temp isn't the end all, that you can still get some pretty nice temperatures at 145. With that said, I go back to what I talked about earlier, that the way that we kiln hops in America, that those bottom hops are getting over dried most likely. So that's one thing. We're doing some other research that I'm not quite ready to divulge yet, but so a certain farm may be more predisposed to hop creep, and that might be something I can expand upon next year. But there's that. And then let's not forget too, just the crap load of hops that we're all adding to our beer now. That's a part of it. You're adding 2 pounds per barrel for some breweries is pedestrian. 3, 4, 5 pounds per barrel is normal for a lot of small breweries. And that's probably one of the biggest factors contributing to hop creep. And we're using a lot of ALDC, which you can buy from Brewer Supply Group.
Yeah.
And I think it
Murphy
comes from Murphy and Sons, and that's a bit of a band-aid, but it does help. We're definitely experimenting with cooler temperatures for our dry hop beers, for dry hopping, because that definitely helps it. But you still are going to have that enzymatic reaction going on, so you are making sugar. You just may not be fermenting because you're fermenting or you're dry hopping cold. And doing your if you don't have a GC, which most breweries don't, doing that forced diacetyl test is absolutely critical to not have the diacetyl in your beer, and wait it out. Don't push that beer, because that's your reputation right there.
Right. All right. We're already at the 2 o'clock mark. I don't want to go over and use your guys' time. There are quite a few more questions. So whether or not you can stick around maybe for 1 or 2 more, if that's okay. I just want to, yeah.
Good.
All right. Perfect. One question I really liked was curious to hear what everyone's favorite lesser known or overlooked hop varieties are.
I love Centennial. I think Centennial is kind of one of those, it's not an old hop, it's not a new hop, but good Centennial is like one of the things that I look for every year. You just get this amazing lemon warheads candy quality out of it, at least what I look for in it. That just like, it can be the star of the show. It can be, you know, the small portion of the hop load, but it just adds that amazing citrus quality that, like, to me is just as like potent as a Citra Mandarin quality or anything like that. I just love that hop.
I think for me, probably the smell of Chinook straight out of the bag is one of the like absolute best smells ever to me, like every time. But the translation of the beer into being like you know, a little bit different. But yeah, Chinook for me, and then I don't know, maybe Saaz. I think just like the smell of Saaz in a Pilsner is so beautiful and perfect. I've been on a search of trying to find like our hop for Pilsner, and you know, I think that, you know, you have Saphir with Pivo Pils, and you have Vinnie. I forgot at the moment what pill or what hop you guys are doing over there with your Pilsner.
Aramis.
There it is. Yeah, Aramis for you
From
guys.
France.
Yep. And so I continue to try to find like our own, you know, kind of mark on that. And I have still failed, but I'm like destined to find something that is as interesting as I think what you and Matt have been able to develop with your Pilsners. But anyway, those are uncool hops is my main point.
All right, we'll keep moving. What are your thoughts on first wort hopping? Any of you doing it?
We do it in our 10-degree Czech lager, but not so much in IPAs and stuff. I think there's so much other hopping that happens in IPAs that the nuances kind of run over for that. But we make a 10-degree, 10 Plato Czech lager year round now. It's just been kind of, it wasn't officially decided, but we have had it on for the last like 10 months now.
It's delicious, by the way.
Thanks, Evan. But that beer gets a really healthy charge right when we start runoff, and it has this really like deep. It's 100% Saaz, and it has this like really deep like hop flavor and aroma, and it doesn't get dry hopped, and it doesn't get any hops. Like the last hop that goes in the kettle is still 30 minutes before the end of boil. So it's all backloaded or front loaded depending on which way you set your timer for your brew. We do it in that one, and I think it contributes a lot, and it might be something we play with some other lighter styles. But I see, you know, the IPA arms race, people doing that in IPAs, and we've done it, and I don't know that it does anything in a beer that's already that loud, but in a more delicate style, like it's part of that recipe. Like that's the procedure for that beer.
Yeah, we first wort hop our both our lagers, our Helles, Velvet Glow, and then STS Pills. They both get first wort hopped, and again, just that delicate finesse that Peter touched on. I don't need to rehash what he said.
Well, what's
I don't feel like it does I don't feel like it does a whole lot. I mean, maybe I'm not you know, looking at these beers correctly, but for me, I've tried it out a bunch of times. I avoid it these days, and I think that I would rather just, you know, if you're throwing the first wort in, it's essentially your bittering addition that you're just putting in early. I'm not convinced that I'm getting more hop character out of what it is, more than I'm just adding, I don't know, a weird amount of work for myself when I just want I'd rather just wait for the wort pH to be perfect before I'm adding hops.
Well, then, do you age your hops for late hot side or whirlpool additions to increase the precursors for biotransformation in your hazy IPA?
We don't age hoppy beer
Right.
hops just for, you know, we do some lambic influenced beers that we do aged hops in, but yeah, no aging of hops for me.
What are you guys' opinions on high temp 70 to 72 Fahrenheit fermentation of ales using lager yeast?
No experience with that.
We've made some beers, you know, like hoppy beers where we used our lager yeast, you know, because we were done with it one of our 2 lager beers and then fermented it. I don't know if we went that warm, but we were at like 68 Fahrenheit. And the general consensus is for the hoppy beers, our team liked the ale yeast version better, maybe because it was a little fruitier and that fruitiness complemented the beer, the hops a little better. That was just our take. Wasn't that they were bad beers. It's an interesting take to make a kind of pseudo steam beer style IPA, doing that. But that's all I have to add.
Yeah, we've done it once before. We did a collaboration with our friends at Creature Comforts using a lager yeast to make a hazy IPA. And I want to say that we only went as high as 65 or 68, so not as high as 72, but that is outside of the sort of conventional temp range for lager. And I was pretty surprised at like the haze stability as well with that lager yeast. It was pretty fun.
Well, excellent. That kind of rounds off all the questions that everyone's asked. I do have one last question for everyone. I want to just say that, kind of after all the beer throughout the day, especially if you're in Yakima, everyone's used to going over to the Lotus Room. I made me.
So good.
Way too many bad drinks from Jim Wiggins at the Lotus Room. He has this he has this poison that he decides to hand you, and it's the worst joke I've ever been involved in, but it's just here you go, and you're just I don't know what to do with this. I can clean a toilet with it, but I can't put it in my mouth. This is awful.
It's a rite of passage, to be sure.
It kind of is. If you've been to Yakima and you haven't been to the Lotus Room, I recommend it. We definitely need to support them next year, because this year they're going to be, struggling without all of the brewers in town and Jim Wiggins without his account.
Jim Wiggins.
He's off somewhere drinking a 2-liter boot in under a minute right now.
I
know. So no, that leads me to my question. What has been your favorite cocktail this summer? Peter, go.
My go-to is always a last word, and I always describe it as a brewer's cocktail. It's just equal parts lime, maraschino liqueur, green chartreuse, and London dry gin. And I call it a brewer's cocktail because it's herbal, bitter, boozy. It pushes all my beer buttons, but it changes changes the mood, we'll say.
Sure. Tim, how about you?
Anything with mezcal, throw it at me. I usually just let the bartender choose, but a mezcal Negroni is always my go-to, if I will. Yeah.
Oh man, mezcal with Chinar. I don't know if you've done that together, but I do 2 parts mezcal to 1 part Chinar. Just stir orange zest. It's so much fun. I got really into this rum book called the Smuggler's Cove rum book. That's in your town, Tim. I don't know if you knew that. It's in San Francisco. Anyway, yeah, this book's been super fun though, where I've been into rum in the past, but I think through traveling through this book and buying different types of rum, I've discovered that Jamaican rum is such a fun is the type of rum that I was looking for. And so I ended up diving pretty heavy, too heavy for a moment during this COVID times into that book. But Mai Tais and then just daiquiris have been just the summertime crusher for me, of just especially that Mai Tai made with some house-made orgeat, some Jamaican rum. It's just kind of like a nutty rum margarita.
Vinny, how about you?
I haven't been drinking many cocktails this summer. It's been a wine summer. So just lots of Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, and a little Cabernet thrown in there. But Yeah, I think I'm working longer hours now more than ever, and need to be up early, working late. Wine just was more appropriate with the right alcohol level.
Oh
Well, I
man,
will.
yeah, I made that mistake a couple too many times during this isolation and everything, where I'm just like, I gotta stop having 3 or 4 rum drinks a night. This is gonna kill me.
Well, luckily this summer I have not been drinking Lotus Specials. I mean, one of those already can kill you. So, no, actually,
man.
at the beginning of sort of the isolation and the beginning of COVID, Bagby had posted their Paloma recipe online, and so I've been making pretty decent amount of Bagby Palomas
Ooh,
this
very
summer,
nice.
and it hits the mark. So, well, guys, I just want to thank you for taking the time, answering all these questions, and sharing your experience with us all. You know, hopefully we can see you in 2021 over a pint and not via Zoom. So, really appreciate it though. So,
Good.
anyway,
Thanks for having us.
yeah, absolutely. So, if we didn't get to any questions today, please send them to webinars@bsgcraft.com, and we'll work with the group to get your answers. So remember, you can always watch past webinars by going to the link at the bottom of our registration page, and also register for future webinars on our website at bsgcraft.com/webinars. So from everyone at BSG, thanks for tuning in. I'm Dan Carney, and I will see you around.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you later.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
good time, guys.
Good. See you. Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye.